Okay, welcome to Module 12. So in this video, we're building a simple intrusion detection system in Bash. It's going to watch for failed SSH login attempts and send you alerts when something sketchy is going on, like someone trying to brute force your server. So to begin, we're going to start straight away with installing the necessary packages. For this, you're just going to need mail utils and curl. We're going to be using a lot of things that are fundamental to Bash. So go ahead and install that. We are going to be calling this script IDS Lite, and we're going to give ourselves executable privileges to this file so that we can run it. Simple as that. We're then going to begin with a shebang to tell the system that we're using Bash to run the script, and then we're just going to define our colors. So paste our colors in, simple as that. I went over how to use colors in text in Module 10. We're going to be using red to kind of like print a red banner, a red alert when we cross a certain amount of brute force attempts, but I'll get onto that when we get into it. Then what we're going to do now is we're just going to start defining our variables that we're going to be using throughout this IDS. So we're going to start with alert log. And what this is going to do is it's going to basically define where all the alerts are written to, because we don't just want to output alerts into the terminal, we also want to create an output file that will be stored in this location, which will be /user/local/var/IDS monitor. Bear in mind this directory doesn't actually exist yet. We will put commands in to create this in a little second. Okay, so this is going to be the full path of where we are going to store our alert logs. So we're going into /user/local/var/IDS monitor/logs/IDS alerts .log. We're going to be creating two different subdirectories of IDS monitor, one for reports and one for logs. The next variable we're going to be defining is the threshold. So the threshold will be basically the amount of attempts that we'll have to catch before sending an alert. For this case, we're going to set it to 5. And then we're going to move on to interval. I'm going to set that to 60. It's in seconds. So what the interval is going to do is going to be the time window to monitor repeated login attempts. And then we're going to add an email. The reason we're adding an email is because we want to send this alert to an email. That's why we had to install mail utils. For this, I made an example email. So it was called Dave Chance. Yeah, generic name, I know, but it's the only thing I could come up with, at gmail.com. So you could use your email here. It's not going to spam you. But for this, I'm running an example, and when we run this IDS, I'm going to also check out the email to show you that I received an email of an alert. Then we're going to set up a temp directory. We'll come on to using this later on, but this is going to be in /tmp/IDS temp journal. And I'll explain that a little later on when we get into the second function that we're going to be creating for the script. Then we're going to set up the webhook URL. I'm going to be using a placeholder because for this I can't use my own because that's a security concern for me, but you can replace this with your own. How to get one will be in the description below. But this, again, is just a placeholder. It's not actually going to work. That's why it says XXX, YYY, ZZZ. Simple as that. And then we're going to be setting up a output directory as well. So it's going to be /user/local/var/IDS monitor, which we already partially defined. I forgot my quotations at the start there. Okay, so we know we're going to be storing our results in IDS monitor under user/local/var, but we will just get on to creating the actual directories to store these results just now. So what we're first going to do is we're going to actually create the output directories themselves. So we're going to use sudo make dir -p for now. And you might be wondering, well, why are you using sudo for this? Because we're storing our output in /user/local/var. That is a subdirectory of the root directory. So we need to run this as sudo in order to be able to create these directories under the root directory. Because if we were running this normally, just make dir -p, then we'd be running it as ourselves, not as the root user, so we wouldn't have access to the root subdirectories, hence why I'm running it like this. I've had errors testing this script previously without using sudo in the script, so that is why I'm using it. You're free to try without, but I can't guarantee that it will work. So then we're going to put our output directory, instead of writing out the entire file path, and then we're going to use a brace expansion to create, wrong thing, we're going to use a brace expansion to create our two subdirectories. So we are creating this. Bear in mind the output directory is /user /local /var/IDS monitor. So we're doing sudo make-dir-p /user /local /var/IDS monitor, and then we're creating two subdirectories, one called logs, one called reports, within the IDS monitor directory. One where we will store logs, and one where we will store reports. And then we're going to use the AND operator because I don't want the script to run if there's going to be errors early on. Then after that, we are going to create the alert log using the touch command. Simple as that, and I forgot my dollar. Whoops. Okay. And then we're going to use the AND operator again for each of these directories and permissions that we're giving, just so that if you don't know already, the AND operator will only execute the next command in the sequence if the previous one has successfully been executed. So I don't want the script to go ahead and make stuff, create new directories when there's errors early on. For example, maybe your system doesn't have var, rare, but I've encountered that error when I was testing this, and yeah, and the script goes ahead and it does everything, but it outputs it nowhere, and you get a bunch of errors. So it's easier to do it this way. Then we're going to change permissions recursively so that it applies to every file, everything inside the directory, and we're going to give ourselves full rights. We're going to the group read and executable rights, and others read and executable rights to the files that are within the output directory. If I could find the dollar on my keyboard. Okay, simple as that. And then we're going to change permissions for alert log as well, make them kind of similar. So sudo chmod, and we're going to give ourselves read and write privileges, and then others read, group permissions, we're going to give them read, and others we're going to give read as well. And then we are just going to say that we're applying these to the alert log specifically. Okay, and then we can move on to the next part of the script. It's worth mentioning again, just in case you don't know how permissions work, the maximum value you can have is 7. To be able to read to a file is worth 4. To be able to write to a file is worth 2, and to be able to execute a file is worth 1. You simply just add up those values. So if you wanted to read and write to a file, you'd do 4 plus 2, so you'd get 6. So you'd put your own permissions as 6. If you wanted to be able to read, write, and execute to a file, you'd add up 4 plus 2 plus 1, you get yourself 7, so on and so forth. We are now at the point where we can define our first function, basically just start it. So it's going to be called send alert. Now, creating functions in Bash is quite similar to how you'd make them in Python. We're going to then use a brace, and everything in here that's contained within these braces, so say we just put like hello, and then we close it like that, this is now the send alert function. Everything inside here is the send alert function. So we're going to use indentation to make it clear that we are writing within the function, and we're going to use local, and then we're going to set IP, a new variable, to the first argument, and then count to the second, so that we can get the IPs and counts to be used throughout the script. The reason I'm using local here is because it keeps these variables local to the send alert function, which basically it keeps them scoped inside the function so they don't affect or get affected by other parts of the script. Then we're going to define our timestamp, and then for timestamp we are going to be using command substitution, date plus %f, %t, and then close that off. So this will give us the time format of year, month, day, then hour, then minute, then seconds. Simple as that. Then we're going to come down again, onto a new line, indent to make it clear, and use local again. And we are now going to define, well, build a file name for a report. So report file. So this is going to be the file name that we're creating just now. So we first need to define where it's going to be stored. So we know that we already have output directory predefined. So we want to store it within there, /reports. So we're storing this report file in the report file, which is a subdirectory of the IDS monitor. You can look back in the script and you can see this line here. Oops, sorry. This line here, where I created the report subdirectory of IDS monitor. This is where our report file will be stored. And we're slash again. So now we're there. We're going to create the exact file name. We are going to call the file alert underscore, and then we're going to put our timestamp in here, not like that, in braces, so that basically what I'm about to do, just do exactly what I do here. So we put the dollar, we put the brace, and we put timestamp, and then we put // and you put one square bracket, colon, space, square bracket, and then another slash again, and then you're going to put dash. So what this does, and you put underscore. So what this is doing is it replaces colons and spaces with dashes. So when you use the timestamp variable, so say the output is in year, months, dates, and then hours, minutes, seconds. The hours, minutes, seconds is going to be separated by colons, which isn't very file safe. Simply what the // and then square brackets colon / dash is what it's doing is it's replacing those colons with dashes, which is file safe, much better to work with. And then we're going to underscore, and then we're going to substitute the IP address in, so we know exactly what this file is basically holding, which IP at which time. Simple as that. Then we're going to come down. We are now going to indent again, and here we are going to create our alert message. We're going to be using the colors here as well. So we're going to use echo -e, and the reason we're using echo -e here is because we're going to have to write in the colors, and echo -e doesn't literally print that. It'll make more sense when I write it down. So we're going to just put in square brackets. So what's in here is just a string. So we'll say IDS alert, and then we'll state the IP. So IP add, and then we need to put count. So we need to get the number of attempts this specific IP had logging in. So IP had X failed attempts at, and then we'll specify the time. I need to stop doing that. Time stamp. So now we have the IP that's been trying to brute force our system, the amount of times, and the exact time it's happened. And then after that, we're going to use the color. So we're going to come and we're going to put this, we're going to put $, and then in brackets red. What that does is it just takes this here and puts it into the script. Simple as that. Thinking back though, I quite like to put a \n at the start of that. What that does is essentially just makes a new line. So this doesn't all print in a oneer, which is a bit more readable as well. And then what we write in here between red and no color will be red, and also on a new line, which is a little more readable. So alert, and then we'll say IP triggered, and then we'll say count, so X failed SSH logins, and then after that, this is what we want to write within our alert. So now we need to return the terminal to no color. Otherwise, everything after this will be, well, red. Then we're going to close our quotes, and then we're going to pipe it into a new command, sudo, if I can type in the terminal, sudo t -a, and then alert log. So what sudo t-a is doing is not only are we appending this to the alert log, but we are also showing this live in the terminal as well. Okay, so then we're going to come down again and we're going to indent and we're going to use printf, which stands for print formatted, and we're going to use this title. So this is going to be the section where we actually create the detailed report. I kept this title in my clipboard because it's a nightmare to write out, but I'm going to explain what it does. So printf stands for print formatted, and if you watched module 10, you'd already understand most of this line here, but for the people in the back, basically what this does is it's just going to print the string. However, this is the title, so IDS alert report is going to be the title. Then the \n makes a new line down. So it's going to create the title as IDS alert report, and then it's going to go down a line and put timestamp, and then down a line again and put IP, and down a line again. Every time you see \n, new line. Simple as that. Now, what do these %s, what does this %d mean? So what this means is %s means string and %d means a number. So printf allows for substitution, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a little second. So we are going to use our variables like timestamp, for example, and we're going to create a new line underneath this in a second, basically listing our variables in the respective order so that they are picked up correctly. So for example, attempts, we're going to use the count variable, and we're expecting a number, so we're going to use d. It expects an integer being a whole number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, and it will substitute it in. So I'll show you what I mean by that. And to keep this command going, we're going to use backslashes, and then we're going to enter our variable names respectively. So we're going to come down, \enter. So this is all part of the same command. Again, if you watch module 10, you'd be getting this stuff. If you didn't, no worries, I'll be going over it anyway. And then basically what we're going to do is we're just going to list all of our variables in the exact order of that title. So we're going to start with timestamp, and then you're simply just going to put a space, and then you're just going to put your next variable, IP. So we can see it's IP. IP is expecting a string, so we're going to be putting a string in there. I get you might think, oh, well, how is an IP a string if it has numbers in it? So for example, 192.168.1.1. You might think, oh, well, that's not a string, that's a series of numbers. Well, it actually is a string because of the full stop. An integer would, if we're putting %d, it is expecting just an integer and nothing more. Timestamp, for example, it has colons, so it's a string. IP has dots, so it's a string. Or if it's an IPv6 address, it has colons. And then we need to put the respective variable for attempts. For attempts, we're going to be using count because that is going to be the number of attempts. You get that. Then after that, we're going to be using threshold as the actual threshold. Again, a threshold is %d because threshold is the integer 5. You can see at the top of the script, it is the integer 5. So that is fine, and that will work fine. Then we're going to put our interval as well. Simple as that. Okay, and then we'll go on to the recent activity section just now after we put a / and come down again, because this is all going to be part of the same thing. So for the recent activity, we still have a %s at the end there that we still need to fill. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be filtering, well, parsing the logs for that specific IP address that's causing all this commotion. So simple, we've been through this already in module 5, I think. Sorry if I'm wrong. We're just going to be going through the logs. So we're going to use journal ctl and then -u ssh.service because we're specifically just looking for the SSH attempts here. And then we're going to be using --since. And this accepts weirdly casual time formats. So you could just say 5 minutes ago. So it's going to look through the last 5 minutes of the logs for the IP address, which I'll specify just now. So we're going to pipe that into grep and then IP. And then we're going to close it all in the oneer. Simple as that, done. So yeah, that's going to fill the recent activity, the last percentage S there that you see, the string, with the IP address that is causing all of this drama. So then I'm going to backslash again, then we're going to come down a second time, and then indent, and then we're going to be using sudo t. Now, basically what I want to do here is this IDS alert report I want to put in my report file, not in the terminal. I know I've used T already to append results to the terminal and a file, but we are going to be removing it from the terminal and putting it just in our report file. So we're going to be using sudo t, and then we're going to be using the, hang on a minute, report file variable that we have previously just defined right here. So we're putting this sudo t, so we're appending it to the report file, everything that you see above, and then to get it out the terminal, we need to use the greater than dev null, and that will remove this whole thing, all this IDS alert stuff, all of it out of the terminal, so that in the terminal we just see the SSH login attempts when we get onto that, and this goes into the report. Only the report file, which is good, and that's what we want. So you might be thinking, oh well, how does this all go into specifically the report file? It's the backslashes that allow it. These aren't 3 separate commands. This is one command. Think of these backslashes as colons, if you will, but using backslashes prevents me from writing one massive line with all that in the one line, which would be very hard to manage and look very ugly, especially for people that are coming to edit your script maybe later down the line, and they see that and they think, okay, I hate this guy. We are then going to indent, and for this section we are just going to be sending the report to the email. So we're going to say echo suspicious. That is definitely not how you spell suspicious. That might be how you spell suspicious, I don't know. Suspicious SSH activity from, and of course we're going to be taking the IP, so we tell the user, yeah, this is the IP that's causing all this havoc, and then at timestamp. Simple as that, and that is simply what we're going to be sending. We're going to pipe that into the mail-s command, and we're going to be using our predefined variables. So we're just going to put IDS alert, and then we're going to put IP, simple as that, and then the email variable. For this, it is Dave Chance 1998. Well done, Dave. So that's going to be the email that this sends it to. Simple as that. So Dave Chance will get an email that will show later on in the video when we're testing this script saying suspicious SSH. Hang on a minute, I missed that. I'm glad I read that back. Suspicious SSH activity from this IP at this time, and then we're going to mail the IDS alert for this IP to that exact email. Simple as that. And then we're going to be coming down and indenting again for the last part of this function, which will be sending the webhook or Slack notification. So for this, we're going to be using curl again. Again, if you watched module 10, you're going to be flying. However, for those in the back, we're going to go over it again. So curl-s, silent mode pretty much, so we're not going to get a progress bar. And then we're going to put -x post. What this does is use the post method, and then we're going to put -h, and then we're going to put, hang on a minute, content, 2 seconds, content type. Basically, we're going to specify the content type that we want. Sorry for my bad spelling. Application/JSON. And then basically what this is saying is it's going to tell the server that this is a JSON. And then we're going to backslash, and we're going to come down, indent, and we're going to use --data, which is going to send the alert message in JSON format, and we're going to write the alert message here. So since this is in JSON format, we need to do it this way with a brace, a backslash, and then text, backslash, and then another quotation mark. Sorry, my memory is quite bad. I'm looking at my notes right now for this. And then in here, we can write the IDS alert that we want. It's going to be similar to literally all the other IDS alerts that we've written so far. We'll put, I don't know, 3 exclamation marks because, I don't know, they know it's urgent, I guess. IDS alert. And then we're going to put the IP add count, so IP had X failed SSH logins at, and you guessed it, using timestamp again, and then we can feel free to close this. So we have to put a dot, backslash, hang on a minute, I'm not even in the editor, dot, backslash, quotation, and then a closing brace, quotation, and then we're going to put another backslash. That's got nothing to do with what we just wrote, this is just going to be us coming down. We're going to indent again for the last part of this command, and we're going to be putting in the webhook variable. So webhook, I called it webhook URL, you can see it at the top. Simple as that. So that's going to put your URL in there, which is the destination, pretty much, like a Slack webhook URL, where this is all going to go. Simple as that. And then we can come down and we can just close this function. So we have successfully finished the send alert function. So let's move on to the next function. This function is going to be the function where basically most of, well, where the whole script happens. So it's going to be called monitor logs. Same thing, new function. Bang. Let me just come down here to where we're going to write echo initially initialization message. Just saying monitoring SSH logs. Then we're going to put the output directory so we know exactly where all of our stuff is going, and then we're just going to put simple as that, and then we're going to come down. So this is just our it defines the monitor logs function, and it prints a message saying basically it's just started watching the SSH logs. Next, what we're going to be doing is we're going to declare a bunch of variables using local again. I'm going to write it out, and then I really want to clarify what's happening here. So we're going to do local last line equals 2 quotation marks like that. And then we're just going to write current line IP now IP file and count. Okay. So the local keyword means that these variables only exist inside this function. They're temporary. So now, even though the script already uses variables like IP and count inside other functions like send alert, the other one that we have, we're not redefining them globally here. We're just saying, you know, make a separate version of IP, count, and the rest that lives only inside this function, because we know local means inside that function only. So this is a completely new IP to the previous one. And you'll see when you look at last line equals, you know, 2 quotation marks with nothing in between, it just initializes it as empty because we're going to replace it with current line in a while loop just after this. It will make more sense as the script goes on. So we're going to come down again and we're going to create a while loop. And in this while loop, we're going to define current line. So this is going to be like the actual heart of the IDS. This is going to be what it's doing. So while true do, we come down and then indent twice because we're now inside of the function, inside of a while loop, just to make sure that the script is readable. I'm going to say current line equals journal ctl -u ssh.service. So we're following only the SSH logs here. We're going to do -n 1 -no -pager, and then we're going to close that. Simple. So what is this doing? This line just grabs the latest SSH log entry using journalctl-u ssh.service, which, as I've said already, filters the logs for only SSH lines. -n1 just gets the latest line, and no pager makes it so it doesn't open in less or any kind of viewer. Less essentially will open a separate scrollable viewer that we don't want. We just want plain text. By using no pager, we get our result in plain text, which is exactly what we want. We're then going to indent twice because we're still within the while loop, and then we're going to write a line to check if the current line is the same as the last line. And if it is, we're going to skip the rest of this loop. because we want to avoid looping over the same line twice. Now, you could use an if statement here. We could just write if current line equals last line, then sleep 1 and continue. Continue will skip the rest of this while loop that we're going to be writing, which will effectively skip checking the same line twice. So instead of that, we're going to make it simple, and we're going to actually use the AND operator instead of an if statement, just to keep the script kind of as concise as we can. So we're going to say straight away, current line equals, and then we're going to say last line. I need to make it a variable. Okay. And then in that case, so basically we're saying so current line equals last line, and we're going to be using the AND operator. Now, it's kind of like just a cheeky use of it, essentially. So we know the AND operator only executes the next command if the previous one's true. So if the current line is the last line, then what we're going to do is we're going to use braces here, because we need to use braces for this. Sleep 1, so we're going to wait 1 second, and then we're just going to write and use semicolons to keep the command going, and we're just going to write continue. Simple as that. So what that's going to do is it's going to skip the rest of the while loop that is basically holding this entire function, and it'll loop over again from the start, and you'll understand it when the full script is written a bit better. And then just to finish this off, we're going to have to indent twice again for a new line, and we're going to redefine last line as current line, because now we need to update it. As we've now checked it, so we need to update the last line as holding the current line. So when this loops again, when the while loop runs all over again, current line is redefined as the newest SSH line, and last line holds the last current line. Simple as that. Now you might be wondering here, why isn't current line redefined as last line? It's because it's not specifically written as this, where last line is redefined. We're comparing variables here, we're not redefining. It's as simple as that. We're going to come down twice, and we're going to indent twice again because we're still within the while loop. And what we're going to do next is simply just echo, I'm not in an editor either, echo, and we're going to just basically just make output message, so log. Okay, so basically what this is going to do is echo the latest log line to the terminal so we can see what's happening. It'll be good for debugging and for like visualizing the IDS in real time. And then after that, we're going to come down again, and we're going to indent twice because we are still within this while loop, and we are going to begin a if statement saying if grep-eqi failed password or invalid user. Then we're going to put 3 greater than symbols, and then we're going to put current line, and then we're going to put then. So what this is doing is this condition just checks if a line contains either a failed password or invalid user. If it does, then we're going to come down and we're going to indent 3 times now, because we're now inside of this if statement, inside of the while loop, inside of the function. Lovely. So now what we're going to do is we're going to redefine IP so we can take the exact IP that is trying to brute force our system. So IP equals $, and we're going to be using a regex. If you have watched my module on regex and parsing, I believe it was called something like that, you'll be fine here. For those that don't know, I will be explaining it for those in the back as well. We're going to be using a IPv4 regex for this, so we're using grep-o-e. -e is needed for the regex to work with grep, and then you're going to just copy your regex. I'll have it in the description. If you remember it, then you're a weapon, but I don't, so there you go. Now, we're going to again put our 3 greater than symbols, and then put current line, because we need something to actually, grep, which is what we're doing. So you might be wondering, well, what does the 3 lines even do, right? What it does, basically, takes this 1 line of text, current line, and then pipes it directly into grep, just like we had written echo current line, grep, but cleaner. So just shoves the exact line into grep, which is exactly what we want. Now I need to cover the regex. What's the regex? So this thing right here, this bunch of stuff is a regex. It is a pattern designed to match something. So this regex matches IPv4 addresses. So when we run this script, it will also output the IPv4 address of the person who tried to brute force our system. In this case, it will be the localhost address, but you'll see that when we get onto it. And then we're going to check that we actually have an IP using -z for 0 length. Okay, and then we're going to put our IP variable, now that it's been defined again. Close this, and we're going to use the AND operator again to avoid putting another if statement in. So what we're saying is, if IP is blank, if we have no IP, then we're going to continue. We're going to completely end the while loop. We're skipping it because we need an IP. Okay, if there's no IP, then it's probably not a brute force attempt. Because in the logs, the SSH logs, it always comes with an IPv6 or IPv4 address, but in this case, we're going to be forcing IPv4 addresses, so it's going to have one. So again, the regex looks for something that looks like an IPv4 address, like 192.168.1.1, for example, and then what we're saying in this -z part is if we don't find an IP, we skip the rest of the loop. Again, just to recap, so now we know what we're doing here. We're fine now. So we're going to come down again. We're then going to indent 3 times again because we're still in the same if statement, and we're going to define the now variable so that we can record the attempt time that this person tried to brute force our system, our server, whatever you want. So we're going to put now date plus %s, lowercase s, not uppercase s, that's important, so that we can get the current time in seconds using plus %s, simple. So we're going to come down, and we're going to define IP file as well. We're going to use the tempter variable /IP, substitute that in. We're going to come down again, and we're going to create, hang on a minute, I'm not in the right line, create the temp directory for if it doesn't exist already. Okay, then we're going to print now into that file. Okay, so again, get the current time in seconds, and then with IP file, we're going to build a path like /tmp /IDS_temp_journal/ whatever IP address tried to brute force your system. For example, we'll say it's 192.168.1.1. You'll have something like /tmp /IDS_temp_journal/ 192.168.1.1. Make their -p, we already know. Make sure that the directory exists if it doesn't already, and then finally we just echo that timestamp and append it to the IP file. It's as simple as that. That's why we have 2 greater than symbols to append to the file. 1 greater than symbol would overwrite the file. We don't want to do that. We just want to add this new attempt to this file. And then we're going to come down twice, and we're going to move on to the next section. We're going to come across 3 times again because we're still within the if statement. And now we're going to use the interval. Now bear with me because this is going to be quite difficult to explain. So first we're going to use awk. Now awk is a tool that reads through text files line by line. Think of it as a mini script that checks each line and then decides whether to keep it or throw it away. Okay, simple. And then we're going to use -v and then cutoff. Now -v passes a variable that we're calling cutoff. Cutoff isn't a command. I know that awk is used for cutting stuff, so it might look like a command, but now it is not. Okay, and now what this command is going to hold is the value, and we're going to use 2 brackets here because we're doing arithmetic inside of these brackets. Now subtract interval. Okay, now we're setting the value of cutoff to now subtract interval. This is just the way of Bash doing math, pretty much. Again, the 2 brackets allow us to do arithmetic. So basically, this gives us a number that says only keep failed login timestamps from the last 60 seconds or whatever interval that we set. Now, what we're going to write is actually inside of the awk, $1 greater than equal to, and then we're going to put cutoff. Now, I'm going to close that. So, again, inside awk, this little script runs on every single line in the file. $1 means first column, and in our case, each line in this file is just one number, like a timestamp, and it will be something like 17286777265 or something like that, okay? And we're saying to keep this line if the timestamp is greater than or equal to the cutoff time. So anything older than 60 seconds gets dropped, pretty much. And then after that, we're going to come across and we're going to put IP file. And then we're just telling awk which file to read, basically. This is where the file where we've been saving all the timestamps or failed logins by this IP address. This is where it's all going. Okay, so awk is now filtering that file, keeping only the recent attempts. And then we're going to put greater than, and then we're going to put quotation dollar and then a brace, and we're going to put IP file like that .tmp, and then close those quotations. So now we're saying that we're saving that cleaned up list into a new temporary file, same name but with .tmp at the end. This lets us keep the original untouched until we're sure our filtering is working. Sorry, it's quite hard to explain for me. And then finally, we're going to silence the errors. Easy to explain. I feel more comfortable with that. Like, so hiding any error messages, for example, if this IP file doesn't exist yet, awk might complain, but we don't care. So awk can shut up. Basically as simple as that. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to come down 3 times indentation. I'm going to put MV. I haven't shown MV yet. It's quite a simple command. I probably should have put it in my first video, to be honest. Thinking back on it. But anyway, what we're doing here is we're going to put the new file that we've just created, and then we're going to put the normal file side by side. So what this is doing is we're just replacing the original file with the filtered version. So that way the file always contains only recent login attempts. And I hope that makes sense. Move, MV, yeah, just completely replaces the file, or it copies files, depending on what you want it to do. So that's going to be that for interval. I'm sorry if you don't understand it, but you can be free to check out my GitHub if you need extra help understanding that. I hope my explanation was okay. That was a bit tricky to explain. We're then going to return to something a little bit more simple, and we're going to get the count. The count is going to be super easy to get. We're just going to count the number of lines. It's as simple as that. So we're going to get wc-l and put the output of IP file in, so we know we're counting those lines. So we start by counting the number of lines, and then we're going to open a new if statement. I know it is inception, so we're going to come in 4 times. Not 4 times, sorry, 3 times. We're going to do 4 times in a second. And we're going to put if count is greater than or equal to threshold. I hope threshold is spelled correctly. I'm going to close that. Then, and here's where we come across 4 times, because we are inside the function, inside the while loop, inside the if statement, inside another nested if statement, and we're going to use send alert. We're calling on send alert, the previous function, and we're going to put the target IP and the count. Simple. And then we're going to clear the IP file so that when the loop runs again, we start with a fresh file. And we're going to close that if statement on the same line it began. Simple. So to recap, now we count how many times, how many lines, timestamps are in the IP file. Each line represents a failed login attempt, we know that. So if that number reaches or exceeds the threshold, which we know is 5, then we call send alert, passing the IP and the count. So send alert will now go, because it's crossed the threshold, we will now send the alert, we'll put the alert in the terminal and we'll send the email to the email address saying, intrusion detection alert with this IP. And we'll say, as we've said already, up at the top here, you can see suspicious SSH activity from this IP. So we pass the IP at timestamp. Simple as that. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're just going to close all the loops. So we're going to close this if statement, the previous one. Going to come down again, and we're going to wait a little second, and then we're going to close the while loop. Done. And then we're going to close the function. Simple as that. We're going to come down again, and we're simply just going to do the last thing in the script. Hang on, not go down that far. I didn't mean to scroll. We're going to do monitor logs, the name of the function that we just wrote, which will call the monitor logs function to start. So now that we're finished, we can Control-O, enter to save, and Control-X to return to the terminal. We're going to clear the terminal so we can get something completely new, so we can just watch this from the start. Okay, let's run the script. Right, bring me the errors. Let's see. Okay, cool. Let's open that and we'll have a look at what we have to deal with. I'll get back to you in a little second. Okay, come in here. We can see there's a missing quotation. When I also ran this, I checked in the reports directory and found that there was no report file. Issue is, I did not pipe this anywhere. So I was basically just running these commands one by one. They needed to be piped into sudo t, which I just totally forgot, to be honest with you. Now I'm going to have to talk about the email. So when you're running the script, if you run it and you get the email perfectly, that's brilliant. However, you may not get any emails. Now, you might have to install postfix and set up SMTP if it doesn't work. And if that doesn't work, then you're better using something like Mailgun, set up Mailgun, and then try to make the email work that way. To which, if none of that works, I'm going to show you how to set up a Mailgun API key so that you can just send it through Mailgun, effectively kind of ignoring the problems with Gmail not accepting your SMTP request. But if you're having a lot of trouble with the email part of this, then please check out my GitHub, because I'll have full errors specifically on how to resolve problems with email. I'll talk you through it entirely. But before we do that, I'm going to run the script normally, because I'm going to be using a placeholder API key to show you how to do it, which will actually make it so the script doesn't work. So Control-O, enter to save, Control-X, and let's run the script. Okay, and it starts running perfectly fine now that we've fixed our errors. You can see we're getting our initialization message and our log message as well. So if we leave full screen and we generate some SSH entries, we can trigger the alert and see it in real time. So we can see when we get invalid user, because we used grep to get invalid user from lines, so those lines are showing up. We've got failed attempts coming in, and we're triggering an alert. You might be wondering, why did that alert go off if we only did 3 attempts? It's because it's scanning previous logs as well since the last alert. No team, don't worry about it. It's because we didn't actually use a real webhook. If you use a real webhook, then that won't show up. It will send the alert. So do this again, we generate 3, do it again, and then on the fifth one, we get an alert. So that's perfect. We get the IP address in that alert. We can see that it's red as well, which is super cool. So let's check out the directories to see if there's any new files. So user / I believe it's in local /var/IDS monitor. I think that's the path. This might be wrong. Oh no, it's not. It's right. Cool. So let's go into logs, get a listing, and we can see the alert log. So let's have a look at what's in here. We'll cat it. Alright, we can see our alerts have been logged. Very cool. So let's go up one directory and then into reports. And then we'll get a listing of that as well. And we can see there's a couple things in here. Might have been executable from earlier testing. However, we'll just load one of them. So we'll have a look in here. All right, and you can see that we've logged all of our stuff in this report. So we have the timestamp, 10:48:12. So that's the latest one. That's the one we just did. We have the IP address, the number of attempts, the threshold 5, the interval being 60 seconds, and we have all the recent activity that has been captured. So now let's show you how to sort out an API, and we're gonna have to be quick about this because this video is going to be, it's going to be so long. So let's just get straight into it. Let's go straight into the script and let's sort this out quick. I'm going to be using a placeholder API to show you how it's done. So what you're going to do is you'd replace this line here entirely. So just get rid of it. So we'd have to use curl again. This is literally just module 10 all over again quickly. So we're going to do curl -s to silence it, --user, and then you're going to put your API key in here. Now, this API key that I'm using is totally fake. It's not going to work otherwise. But this is just an example. If you wanted to go and use Mailgun because Gmail or something wasn't working, then you can. So we're going to put a backslash. We're going to come down, indent once, not twice. And then you're going to paste the URL, target URL of where the messages are kept. You can put it in here just like that. And then you're going to backslash, come in again. And you're going to -f from, and you're going to put equals. And then you're just going to put your domain. So IDS alert, and then you'd put your username. So we'll say Dave Chance, and we'll put the sandbox because this username would be in the sandbox you created. So that's perfect. That's also fake. The sandbox thing is fake. Don't worry about it. It's just placeholder so that I can show you how it's done. And then you backslash again, come down, indent, and then you -f. And then you put 2, and then you just put your email in here. Simple as that. Well, you would write your email if you didn't have the if you didn't have it already predefined, but you know, we do. We already have that variable predefined, so that's cool. And then you want to set your subject. So subject, I don't know. We'll put IDS alerts, and then substitute the IP in as well, which you could do. So that would be the title. And then to put backslash as well, sorry for forgetting. And then we put -f, text, and this is your body. This is what is going to be said. So we'll say the same thing again, suspicious SSH activity at timestamp from this IP. And you just close it like that, simply. Hang on a minute, you don't need quotes here. I don't know why I'm quoting inside quoting. I just realized that. Anyway, simple as that. And that's how you'd sort the API out. So if you wanted to use an API instead, I'll have steps on the GitHub to tell you how you do that essentially. And that's just how you set it up. It's as simple as that. So if Gmail's not working, if you use postfix, set up postfix, install postfix, configure SMTP, and then you use Mailgun, and that still doesn't work, and use the sandbox, and it still doesn't work, then you can use the API key, which will work just fine. So, Control save and exit, and that is where we're going to wrap it up for this episode. And this is the last episode of this series. I'm sorry it was so long. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you learned something. I will see you in a while.